This is it. You're listening to Jacob Dean.
There's a tide pushing back the rights of each of us. It will continue and it will crush us because those who created it are organized and unified and hell-bent. And the only response is to be organized and unified and hell-bent in return.
We bring you the real stuff.
We must protest this deal and all the goddamn deals to come in the streets. We must arise non-violently but insistently. General strikes, boycotts, protests, sit-ins, non-cooperation, takeovers.
You're listening to Jacob.
Modern versions of that resistance, facilitated and amplified by a weapon our predecessors did not have, the glory that is instantaneous communication.
Streaming live on the web.
It is from an old and almost cliched motion picture that the wisdom comes. First, you've got to get mad.
This is it.
I cannot say to you, meet here or there at this hour or that one, and we'll peacefully break the back of government that now exists merely to get its functionaries reelected. But I can say that the time is coming when the window for us to restore the control of our government to ourselves will close. And we had damn well better act before then, because this deal is more than a tipping point in which the government goes from defending the safety net to gutting it. This is wrong. And while our government has now declared that it has given up the concept of right and wrong, you and I have not and will not do so.
Not me. Rule number one, turn on the microphone. Welcome, greetings. Hello out there.
And we're back.
Got my levels checked here. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Happy Labor Day, everyone. My name is Jacob Dean. We are broadcasting live. It is Labor Day, September 5th, 2011, 7 p.m. here on the East Coast, 4 o'clock to my fantastic following of super-duper friends on the West Coast. It is 4 o'clock on the West Coast, and thank you so much for joining us. I see we have several people already in the chat room. If you're not in the chat room yet, make sure to make your way on over to the chat room, and you can interact live with us and chat with us live during the broadcast this evening, as well as all of the broadcasts that we do here on Filter Free Radio. My name is Jacob Dean. I am your host. And let me welcome in our fantastic co-host who's here every program except for, well, I don't know. It's going to be a really sad day when you miss a show, the first show you miss, Scott. I'm gonna be very sad. But Scott's with us, Skeptical Scott. Scott?
Hello.
Hello.
Got it ready, sorry.
I was sort of waiting for that, that's all.
Oh, you were waiting for me and I was waiting for you. Okay.
Hello.
There we go.
Thank
Okay.
you.
There we go. I have the hello ready this week, and it is Labor Day, and I have a fantastic Labor Day show planned for you, and hopefully we can educate you a little bit and get you all caught up on what you need to know about Labor Day and how important it is for us today to be more involved in the labor movement. Or just as our opener, Keith Olbermann mentioned, this is about a month ago, but I still love playing that clip, and I will continue to play that clip because he is so right. Our opposition is unified and organized and hell-bent, and if we plan to compete with that, we need to be organized and, well,
the rub is
fill it in.
The class war started, at the beginning of the New Deal, but as far as we know, it started at least 30-plus years ago with Ronald Reagan and the busting of PATCO, obviously bringing down the labor unions. That was his war on unions. And so we're really behind the curve. We really got to get started fighting back.
Right. We are behind the curve. We are overdue for a revolution, for a nonviolent, active revolution. And it's simply, we are the people, and the people are beginning to wake up, or at least I want to believe that the people are beginning to wake up. I'm seeing some evidence that the people are beginning to wake up.
Oh, hey, we're doing the show, right? Before this, what were we doing? Sitting around bitching about it.
We were sleeping, and now we've awoken, and we would like nothing more than for you to awaken with us and to become active with us and to get the word out there with us. That's what we're doing. Let me quickly mention a huge thank you to our awesome friend and, basically boss. We love Nicole Sandler, and we are broadcasting live on RadioOrNot.com. So a big shout out and a big thank you to Nicole and all of the other awesome shows here on Radio or Not. I want to give a big shout out to Kenny Pick, who you can listen to live here on RadioOrNot.com Tuesday and Friday nights. Kenny's done a bunch of liners for us, and we're going to play some of the promos
Kenny has that radio voice.
And do not count out one bit at all Miss Left Neck Chick, that's Danielle. She broadcasts live here on Wednesday nights on radioornot.com. And webmaster extraordinaire who I owe a million thanks for.
Shano.
Shano. Go check out filterfreeradio.com. All created by Shano, and let us know what you think. Let Shano know what you think. Shano broadcasts live, Funked in the Head here on radioornot.com Thursday nights. So we are live 5 nights a week, and we would love nothing more than for you to join us every single night and to get the word out there. Make sure you tell a few of your friends what we're doing here, and we can get more people involved. And I also want to get into a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to dive right into the Labor Day stuff because today is Labor Day, and Labor Day is very important to me personally because Labor Day has always meant actually a vacation. Well, first of all, a day off, and we're going to get into that and why a day off is so important, and who actually fought for the day off that we're all having today. But, you know, it is Labor Day, and I wanted to work on Labor Day and do a show on Labor Day, so we're here.
This isn't work. This is a labor of love.
Exactly. It's a labor of love. And so anyways, where was I going? Oh, yes, Labor Day to me. What Labor Day means to me has always been a vacation, actually, to the Oregon coast. I'm from Oregon. I'm actually wearing a Lucky Lab shirt, a Lucky Lab local brewery in Portland, with a black lab on it, for a special reason today. Because Labor Day has always meant a trip to the Oregon coast and a day off and a vacation for my father and I. And we used to go to the Oregon coast every year on Labor Day weekend or the week leading up to Labor Day weekend and just relax and take a vacation. We did it once a year, every year. And, you know, just go to the coast and lay out on the beach. And
come out to the coast. Have a good time. Relax.
Yeah, you know, eat some fresh seafood. Go crabbing off the dock and catch some crabs, which is always a lot of fun. But most importantly, it was actually about taking a day off and getting a chance to recuperate and recover from, you know, the summer leading into, you know, the fall work schedule.
Yeah, you get a whole day to decompress.
Amen. and more and more, the days off, at least, you know, for the people who can actually find a job and are working, days off are becoming more few and far between. You're no longer working, you know, a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I mean, you take any work you can get. Am I right?
Well, yeah, I've got friends who are working 60, 80 hours a week, and of course, they're getting paid salary. So you're getting paid on a 40-hour wage, even though you're working twice that.
Oh, I want to mention really quick a big shout out to my mom who's in chat right now.
Taffy Ann.
Taffy, hey Mom. One of the reasons why I wanted to do a show on Labor Day is because my mom normally works on Monday evenings and she isn't able to listen to the show live. So she's actually, she has a day off. She's enjoying her Labor Day because she is a laborer. She works. And so everybody in chat say hello to Mom in there. And but most importantly, it's about getting a day off. It's about getting a day off and recovering. And
well, technically, I think as far as I remember, you know, coming up in the unions, I've worked in many unions in my life. I was always reminded, at least by my representatives, that today is a remembrance of unions, of the labor struggle. It's why it's called Labor Day.
Bingo. It's
not really a vacation. It's a reminder. It's sort of a memorial of the labor struggles and time to take people to stop and say, okay, be thankful for the 40-hour work week and no child labor and health care, if you have it, etc. So it really is about labor.
Perfect point, Scott. I'm kind of doing this. I'm hiding my point here. My point is what I'm portraying is the average American's portrayal of Labor Day. They don't, and that's kind of the point. The point is they don't really understand all of the struggling, all of the fighting, all of the protesting, all of the involvement, all of the get out there and get active that occurred for us to even have unions, to have labor, to have jobs, to have a livable wage, to have a weekend, to not work 16-hour days. I mean, what we're going to get into a little bit of the history of labor. I mean, in the 1800s, and we're just talking a couple hundred years ago. I mean, think about that. That's only a couple of generations. I mean, a couple of generations ago, the average American worked more than 70 hours a week, and that was that was the normal. That was the average, more than 70 hours a week. And that was, not by not by choice, but out of necessity, really. You didn't have a livable wage, and so we're going to get into this. Matter of fact, I'm already getting into it, and let's just dive in, because I'm excited for Labor Day. I really am. To really share what it means to me, and coming from a labor background family, labor family, it's really important, because as the middle class is eroding away, it's becoming more and more apparent that how screwed we've become over time. If all of this just happened at once, of course people would have stood up in protest and went crazy about it and fought it. But since it's slowly eroding us away over 30, 40 years, I mean, when you go from A to B to B to C to C to D to D to E and so on, it becomes a gradual change that you don't really notice. And so we just kind of always go along, always accepting the crappier benefits, the more work, et cetera. Whereas if we went directly from A to Z all in one step, it wasn't a gradual transformation, you would have seen violent, probably protests in the street, people angry,
Well, what you're pointing out, Jacob, is the fact that every 30 years is what's a new generation. Generations typically are considered 30-year cycles.
Right.
And so every 30 years, the institutional memory is lost. So every generation fails to remember, or at least learn the message and the trials and errors of the previous generation. Of course, that's why we have history repeating itself now with this new golden age that we're coming down from. I mean, literally the analogies between now and the Great Depression are so frighteningly stark, it's unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, with the disparity of wealth from now to 1929 being, this is greater. The disparity of wealth in our country right now is greater than it was in 1929. And so, I mean, without FDR and without his movements, and the people who pushed him to move, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't even have a labor struggle. It wouldn't be, they would have been killed, like in the Ludlow massacre. The companies just would have hired their goons or brought in the National Guard and just assassinated the workers if they struck or went on strike, and then brought in scabs, and that would have been the end of it.
Absolutely, and you mentioned a very key, significant figure in the fight for all of this. We were once where we are today. We were here before. And like you mentioned, history is repeating itself. We're literally watching history repeating itself. And I'm happy you mentioned that, because we're going to play a little history repeating tune for you when we come back from the break here at the bottom of the hour. But yeah, it's probably, we're not necessarily as aware of the fact that we're actually headed for a Great Depression now as they were back in the 20s and 30s. And it's not necessarily affecting everybody right now.
Well, we're arguably already in a depression. I mean, that's a semantical argument at this point, because we have more unemployed people in a higher percentage than we did during the Great Depression. I mean, if you factor in people, it is a funny little thing that no one ever thinks about. If you factor in people in prison in the United States as being unemployed, along with by the old standards that used to count unemployment prior to Bill Clinton, including the military and as being employed versus, we're really at about 19 to 20% of an unemployment rate, which is higher than the start of the Great Depression.
Right. You look at an unemployment number right now, and I think the numbers going around is about 9.1, 9.2.
Well, which is a farce. That's a lie. I mean, they keep every.
Right. What they don't include in that number is the number of people who've been out of a job so long that they're no longer looking for employment.
Right.
And those who are actively employed part-time
but underemployed,
who are seeking full-time employment.
Right. If you're working less than 40 hours a week, and you're, or at least I think the cutoff is 30 or 28 hours,
right.
You're still considered employed,
right.
even though you're making below a living wage.
Right, and you can't survive on a 20-hour-a-week minimum wage job. Nobody can.
Oh.
I've been there. I've done that. Well, I haven't survived. I was living at home, but I remember exactly. I was living at home, subsidized housing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you had your own little form of socialism going.
Exactly, but when I was working part-time at the pizza shop, it was I wasn't trying to survive, and that's for high school kids or kids who aren't trying to survive, that's definitely a viable option. They should be working and getting into the workforce, but a livable wage, not so much. And that brings us to the first, and I'm going to play this right off the bat because this is the most important clip of the day of the show that you're going to hear. I'm going to play this 2 or 3 times today. This is in my opinion, probably the greatest president of our American history, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This is a speech that he gave from Madison Square Garden. It's very famous. It's also the same speech, "I welcome their hatred." Organized government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very famous speech from Madison Square Garden. This is, I love this, it's Halloween, October 10th, 1936, from Madison Square Garden. This is the President of the United States of America, and listen to the applause that the President of the United States of America gets when he says things like this.
Of course, we will continue to seek to improve working conditions for the workers of America. To reduce hours that are overlong, to increase wages that spell starvation, to end the labor of children and to wipe out sweatshops. Of course, we will continue every effort to end monopoly in business, to support collective bargaining.
What they're trying to take away in Wisconsin.
To stop unfair competition and to abolish dishonorable trade practices. And for all these, we have only just begun to fight.
That applause, this applause goes on for 45 seconds. I'm just going to fade it down now. That applause goes on for 45 seconds. That's what the President of the United States of America used to sound like. And that's the reaction from the people, we the people, that the President of the United States of America used to get when he was for the people, when he was actually working on behalf of we the people. Have you heard a single Republican in the last 2 years, or even just, I mean, recently?
You mean politician? I wouldn't even be. You can't pick left or right in this argument here because nobody talks like that anymore. It doesn't matter who you are.
I was thinking of the current field of GOP 2012 hopefuls. I haven't heard a single one of them say anything remotely close to something like this.
Well, that's because FDR is the devil to them. So. Anything that relates to social justice or social welfare is going to be, they're going to cast aspersions against.
Now, see, I think one of the important things to get from that clip is he's saying we've only begun the fight, and that was in 1936. They theoretically only began the fight in 1936. Of course, it goes much farther back into the 1800s, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But it's gotten to a point where we've begun to recede our progress. Our progress moving forward, the movements and everything that's came about of the labor struggles it's begun to recede. With current,
I mean, we're at the tail end of the recession of labor. I mean, say it begun to recede. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but it started. What was it, 1982 or 1980 when Reagan took office? We had 20% of the workforce was unionized.
Right.
Now it's about 7%.
Now,
20% of the privatized workforce was unionized, and now it's around 7%. And so this is the tail end of the war on workers' wages and workers' rights in the middle class.
In the 1950s, 1 in 3 Americans was in a union, and today it's 1 in 10.
Right.
Right.
That's bad.
So it went from 30% basically to 10%.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of other things.
That's not a coincidence.
No. I want to share with you a report from Zed Jelani of thinkprogress.org. He came out today with, I think is startling. The title, the headline of the report, "The American Middle Class Was Built by Unions and It Will Decline Without Them." And again, this is kind of touching on a point that we were making last week with Chris Hedges' death of the liberal class, and one of the 5 institutional fundamental pillars of the liberal establishment that no longer functions properly for them, unions, labor, and why that is. We got into that last week, and we're going to go back to that next week. Go back to that, Chris Hedges. But Zed Jelani points out in his report today over at thinkprogress.org, I strongly suggest you go check out thinkprogress.org. And it's just like it sounds. He writes, "Today is Labor Day. Labor Day was first celebrated in the late 1880s as labor activists from the American Federation of Labor." What's that sound like? AFL? Which, of course, later became basis for the AFL-CIO.
AFL-CIO, they merged.
Bingo. And other unions rallied around a day to celebrate organized labor and to take a day off. And one of the reasons why I'm wearing my Lucky Lab shirt today from Portland, Oregon, is because Oregon was the first state to actually make Labor Day a holiday. And that was back in 1887.
You damn liberals.
And 10 years later, after Oregon was the first state to make it a holiday, 10 years later, the president at the time, President Grover Cleveland, made it a federal holiday. And the reason that he made it a federal holiday was he was reacting to pressure from unions following the Pullman strike.
Yeah, the Pullman Porter strike.
Right. So, I mean, the reason we have Labor Day is, first of all, laborers and unions fought for it. And the reason we get the day off because it's a national holiday is, again, because labor unions fought for it. So think of that. Keep that in mind. And then Zed goes on to write the four important things that all Americans should recall, these benefits that have been provided to us via unions and labor, the labor struggles. And it's very simple. When you say these things, you think of these things every single day, but you don't realize where they came from and how we got them. Number one, unions gave us the weekend. Yay! Who doesn't get excited for Saturday and Sunday? Who doesn't get excited for the weekend?
Yeah, where'd the term TGIF come from? Obviously after this time frame.
Right. Friday is awesome only because the weekend follows it, and if it wasn't for unions, we wouldn't have a weekend.
Or the term TGIF.
Bam! There you go. Even more important to pop culture.
Exactly.
In 1800s, Americans worked, like I mentioned, more than 70 hours a week, and that was normal. Eventually, labor unions engaged in massive strikes in order to demand shorter work weeks so that Americans could be home with their loved ones instead of always working. All work and no play make Jacob something.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do. Thanks, Scott. And then by 1937, President FDR, his time as president, these labor actions created enough political momentum to pass the Fair Labor Standards Act, which helped create a federal framework for a shorter work week that included room for leisure time. Imagine that! Yay, unions! Unions rock, right? But wait, there's more. Are there any younger listeners out there? Anybody my age? Any parents with kids? Well, if it wasn't for unions and labor and the fight, your kids still would probably be working in sweatshops today.
No, you would need them to work because you need a source of income. You're not paid enough, so you got to put your kids to work. That's the whole reason to have children is another source of revenue.
It wasn't more than 130 years ago, just 130 years ago, just a couple of generations ago, that children under 14 were banned from working. I mean, it's literally, 5, 6 years old. As soon as you were old enough to hold a hammer and hit a nail, man, you were in the shop working. And the wages were so low, they paid everybody such dirt wages that it would take mom, dad, and the 2 kids working to survive. Now, we don't necessarily, I mean, it's not that bad, but you see how it's ever more increasingly becoming like that again? That's the problem.
Well, yeah, there's another aspect I'd like to point out too. It's part of the capitalist struggle. I mean, and to repeal the New Deal and to really bring us back to quite frankly, the 13th century. I mean, I want to say they want us to go back to the old Gilded Age, but they really want to bring us back to the Dark Ages, and that's not a hyperbole. They want two classes. They want the very wealthy, and they want the servant class, and that's really all they care about. But also, too, I mean, what you're mentioning sort of puts it in frame to where we are today and how we got to where we are today, and the regression of the last 70 years. And even most recently in the last 30 years, what you have is with the advent of three things: computers, women entering the workplace, and outsourcing of jobs overseas, and the illegal immigrant labor force to drive down wages. Those are the three major factors in the last 30 years that have caused Americans' wages to stagnate, because the companies themselves have been able to augment the cost of labor by these three other sources besides the human laborers. And so in the 1950s, you had a single family, three husband, wife, two kids, and one wage earner. The husband worked, the wife stayed at home. And then, of course, once those wages were stagnant, they had to have the wife enter the workforce. That was the sad thing is that it's a side effect of the women's liberation movement. Is that demand equal rights, and the capitalists thought, great, cheap labor, and so that was sort of one of the acquiescence that they gave. They said, well, we'll give you women's rights, but you guys got to go to work. So, and that's where we are today. We've got the stagnation of American wages has brought us to this point where everyone wonders how we got here, and well, no unions, certainly don't help.
Right.
So.
And going back real quick to finish up Zed Jelani's article from Think Progress before we hit the break here. The third thing that labor unions brought us that we don't necessarily recall or thank them for is health insurance, health coverage, employer-based health coverage. Because of the rise of the unions in the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s, and the first great expansion of healthcare for all Americans is solely responsible or brought to us by labor unions. They banded together and worked to negotiate for healthcare coverage plans from employers, and by 1950, half of all companies with less than 250 workers and 2/3 of all companies with more than 250 workers gave health insurance one way or another to their employees. And finally, number 4, unions spearheaded the fight for the Family and Medical Leave Act. Okay? Unions like AFL-CIO, that federation led for the fight for this. It was a 1993 law. I mean, this is less than 10 years ago, which, quote, requires state agencies and private employers with more than 50 employees to provide up to 12 weeks of job-protected unpaid leave annually for workers to care for a newborn, a newly adopted child, or a seriously ill family member, or the worker's own illness. If you get sick, there's a law that says you don't have to get fired because you're sick. Or, ladies, if you're giving birth to your child, you actually get some time off to go have a baby.
And I would add conversely to that isn't even enough. That's sort of a piss in the wind, if you will. I mean, it's an improvement, but when you compare us to social democracies like Norway, Sweden, Germany, and France, et cetera, they get a year off. Like, I have friends in Sweden. She has a baby. She takes the first 6 months off paid. He takes the second 6 off. They have paternity leave and maternity leave, which is, the paternity leave is a foreign concept here. So
absolutely. Just the beginning of the Filter Free Radio Labor Day special. When we come back, I've got a bunch of FDR clips we're going to share with you, and George Carlin puts his take on it, and it's very sobering. George Carlin, he knew what he was talking about. So don't go anywhere. My name is Jacob Dean. I've got Skeptical Scott with me here on Filter Free Radio. We're broadcasting live on filterfreeradio.com and on radioornot.com, the home of Nicole Sandler. We'll be right back with more fun stuff on Labor Day. Don't go anywhere. Have you been waiting for a show that gives you the real news you need to know? Have you been waiting for a show that reports the truth and isn't afraid to call it as it is? I've been waiting for that show too, and it's not coming from the mainstream media. It's not coming from the bought and sold corporate media. It's not coming from the news networks that only look out for profits and their bottom lines. They all speak through filters. That's why you need filter-free news. That's why you need filter-free radio. Filter-free radio is your new news headquarters for exactly what's going on and just exactly what we need to do about it. We must move forward. Move forward with us. Filter-free radio, live Monday 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on the Ustream home of Nicole Sandler, radioornot.com, and the all-new filterfreeradio.com.
A big change is coming soon to whitehouse.gov. It's called We the People, and it's a new way to petition your government to take action on a range of important issues.
We the people, that's a phrase we all know from the Constitution, and its First Amendment guarantees your right to petition our government.
Americans have always used petitions to organize around issues they care about. Now, thanks to the internet, they're even more popular. A lot more popular. So popular, in fact, that we've come up with a better way to engage this activity online. That's why We the People matters to you. It's an official way to make your voice heard in our government, and it's simple. Anyone can create or sign a petition on whitehouse.gov that calls on the federal government to take action on a range of important issues facing our nation. But that's just the first step. It's up to you to build support by gathering even more signatures.
And if your petition is among the most popular, a group of White House policy officials, like this good-looking bunch, will review it, make sure it gets to the right people.
And the day that is celebrated around the world as International Workers' Day, May Day, began in solidarity with U.S. workers. And for many years, we in the United States also celebrated Labor Day on May Day. And that was actually very consciously changed. And Labor Day was established as a federal holiday and turned into a kind of picnic, patriotic version that had the teeth taken out of it, had the history taken out of it, had the meaning really drained out of it, in order to turn Labor Day into a day that celebrated work in the most meaningless sense, didn't celebrate the struggles of workers, which have been very long and rich in this country, for basic rights, rights for an 8-hour day, rights to eliminate child slavery, and rights to even form a union. So this tradition has been buried, and it took an even more interesting twist during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan declared that May Day was henceforward Law and Order Day in the United States.
Law and Order Day.
Not only had May Day been shifted to this more or less innocuous holiday at the end of summer, kind of a day off, very rarely celebrated anymore with any kind of meaningful recognition of labor history struggles, and turned May Day itself into a day to